Okay, so this instructional video right now is made for it's there's the assumption that whomever's watching it that you already know how to administer the primary numeracy assessment. And there's a lot of free training and trainings that are on how to give the assessment, how to get the data. But once you go through, and a lot of times people the focus is on the assessment, but then once you give the assessment, you have a lot of different resources that you are going to learn to navigate that will help you reach your journey or your goal of working with your students. So there's going to be four places where you are going to go to get your instruction. And the way that these are laid out, this is kind of the recommendation too of the sequence that you'll go in. And I remember, I just want to point this out too. There's always going to be more activities than what you're going to need. Like if you're working on counting by tens with a student, there may be 20 or 30 lessons altogether. You may only need 8 or 9 of them. So there's always going to be more. So the first thing is don't always think because there's 30 lessons you have to do it. A lot of it you're going to go ahead when you do their assignments and the formative assessment that will help you figure out how long you're going to be working on things. But the first place, no matter what skill you're working on, you're always going to want to start off in the eLibrary 2.0. And the eLibrary 2.0 is a very thorough resource. Let me put the password in. It's a very thorough resource, and I'll show you, what it's designed to do. So again, once you give the assessment, you're going to notice that there are levels. Then you would go into whatever area, whether it's counting or addition subtraction, and you're going to go ahead and look up the level, whatever level their instructional level is, you're going to go ahead and look. The 2.0 is great, and I'll just kind of show you the way it's navigated. It has the levels, and it'll give you the mini lesson, and then there's also the student practices connected to it. And then we'll get into the progress monitoring as well in a little bit. But let's just say you're working with a student who's level B, their instructional level is level B, which means they can't count by tens off decade. So you would go ahead and you would do mini lesson two. And the way that this is set up, there's always the prompts that are there. And so as you're going through, you would go ahead and just read those prompts. And remember, you don't have to just only read the prompts. That's just to help people guide understand what the goal of the lesson is. You can always add your own things to it. But you would just go through this lesson. This whole lesson is all about teaching kids instead of, kids going 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. You want them to learn to count by tens off decade 4, 14, 24, 34, and so on. So that's what this entire lesson is designed to do. So you go ahead, your level B mini lesson two. And then when you're done with that, what you would do is you would go to where it says student practice. So you just practiced, right? Counting by tens off decade up to 66. If you click on the student practice, this is the same thing as me counting by tens off decade up to 66. Okay. So that's the first place where you're going to go. And this is a great introduction lesson. It has all the prompts, it's well structured, everything's there, it has the practice piece. But many times what you're going to realize is after you do a lesson, like it's not like you're going to do the lesson one time, they're going to understand it, and then the next day you go to something else. So you have other places where you can go to work on these things, okay? The next place where you can go, and I know the district that I'm making this for, you have access to something called instant intervention. That is essentially the level activities guide that has been organized for you. But I just want to go through what the activities guide is, and then we'll get into instant intervention. Okay. And what the level activities guide is it's a series of lessons that were created. And if you take a look at how this is structured right here, it has the lessons by like level A and level B and level C. And then it just has like a quick description and it'll have, an image or something. And then what it is, it's just activities that you can do. And this for a long time, this was a really good resource. The problem with the level activities guide is the biggest complaints we would hear from people is we like the activities guide, but when you have to get into our free drive, it's sometimes hard to find. Like, I don't know exactly where to go to get the number lines or where do I go to get the number cards. So people liked using the guide. It was just hard to locate where everything was at. So to help this and make this easier for teachers, what we did is we created the instant intervention. All the instant intervention is, it's those leveled activities that were on that activities guide, but now they're prepackaged for you. So all you have to do, oh, let me get in the right one. All you have to do is just find whatever you're working on. So if we're working on counting by tens, you would go ahead into the instant intervention count by tens, and it says, okay. So remember, we're working on level B. So there's 5 lessons for level B. So you could say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do activity one. So, and what you can do too is at the bottom, you can go ahead and let me move this up here. You can go ahead and at the bottom, you can type in, okay, if we need to get to page 7, you just go here, type in page 7, hit enter, and it'll take you to it. And what instant intervention is, this is a lesson card, okay? And it just gives you a very brief description. These are supposed to be easy, they're supposed to be short. You just read through it and it tells you exactly what to do for level B. And then what you would do is you're not able to print these cards, okay? These lesson cards can't be printed, but you can pull them up on a laptop. You can read them, you can write down notes. But what you can do is when you print on materials, click here. When you click here, it'll give you the materials for that lesson. You go ahead, you print it. This one just requires you to cut them out and glue and make a quick number line and use a 10 catcher. And that is what you would go ahead and what you would do for that. Okay. And then if you take a look at this instant intervention, this is important. It references the 2.0 and the 1.0. This is where after you do, because these are meant to be like explicit direct instruction lessons, that you would do with a small group of students, or if you were doing it with a large group where you'd have them working, in small groups together and working on these types of things. This is where you would go to get the net practice piece after. So it's saying you go to the 2.0, page 147, 148. That's a place where you could go. But when you're doing this, you may have already used that 2.0, page 147, 148 when you did your introduction lesson. So then you may say, all right, I'm going to go to the eLibrary 1.0. The 1.0, which we haven't gotten into, there's a lot of extra practice that's in there. So you can also go there to get additional practice pieces that will go along with exactly what this lesson is. Okay. Now, the last place where you can go for instruction. So remember, you have the eLibrary 2.0, which is always going to be your introduction lesson. Then you have the leveled activities guide, which has these are like more hands-on lessons that you would do with students in a small group. It also can be done whole group. It just takes a little bit more planning for more kids. But you also, your district, who we're doing this for, you have access to instant intervention. So you're never going to really need the level activities guide because you have instant intervention, which is that sort of that next day or what it would look like. So you could be like, Monday, we're going to do the eLibrary 2.0 lesson, the introduction lesson. And then on Tuesday, we're going to do an instant intervention lesson. Okay. And then you could say, all right, on Wednesday now the eLibrary 1.0 was the earlier version, is the first version of our eLibrary. It was created very quickly, like around 2020, right when schools were about to go back to school. We were getting a lot of emails. I'm a math intervention teacher. I need resources for how I'm going to do math intervention. So this eLibrary 1.0 was created very quickly during that COVID. There's only about 90 days it was created in. And what it was designed to do is give math intervention people who had to do intervention virtually, give them the lessons that they could do with their students. Okay. So for this one, and so let me get this opened real quick. Go to 75. So the way that this is set up, we can probably go to 100. Okay, so the way that this one's set up is again, you have your counting, you have counting level A, level B, level C through E, and then you have counting by 10. So we're working on counting by tens. And then the way it's structured, you have level A, we're on level B. So what this is you're going to notice right away, this is not as high a quality or visually done as well as the 2.0, but this is still extra lessons that you could do with your students. You may say, all right, we did the 2.0 lesson and I did an instant intervention one. I still want to do a little bit more direct instruction. So there's not, and the 1.0, some of them have prompts, some of them don't have prompts. So it's like you would always want to use the 2.0s because it's going to teach you like, the prompts I used and what you want to do. And for this one, it's like, okay, we're starting at 3 and we're going to count by tens and we have that 10 catcher right there. And so we would go ahead, let me zoom in a little bit. So we would go through it's 3, then 13, 23, 33. So this is what this is designed to do. It's additional practice that you'll be able to do on areas for whatever you're working on. So again, you have your eLibrary 2.0, which will be your introduction. Then the next place where you probably should go is your leveled activities guide or instant intervention. Those are more your hands-on thing. And then the 1.0, you may not use the 1.0 lessons a lot. You may say between the 2.0 and the instant intervention, I have plenty. But what you will use is the 1.0 workbook. And I'm opening that up. Oh, And what that 1.0 has for you is it's going to have all these, it's going to have all the different practice pieces again. So we're level A, this is counting by ones, and then it has all the different pages that you would have for that. So you have to go through the page, the levels up here. You would just scroll. Now we want to get into level B. This is all counting by ones. So we want to get to counting by tens, which is down a little bit. So let's get to it, which is right. We're getting close. Okay, here we go. So now we are at counting by tens. So now this is more additional practice. Now remember, level A for counting by tens is just 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. This is what it looks like, okay? And remember, this is all really extra additional practice pieces that you can use with your students. So for example, if you're doing level B, it's going to take your kids a couple days. They're not going to just be able to do 1 or 2 days of this. So there's lots of extra practice for counting by tens off decade that you'll be able to go to and use this 1.0. Again, the 1.0 lessons you may or may not use, but you're definitely going to want to familiarize yourself with the 1.0 workbook because there's lots and lots of extra practice. If you remember earlier, I said you're always going to have more pieces, more instruction, more workbook pages than you're going to need. The idea is we're going to give you so much that you'll always probably have too much, not enough too. So as you go through and you're working on this, that is where you'll get your instruction and your practice. Okay. So now we're going to talk about progress monitoring. All right. So progress monitoring obviously is tied into your instruction because you're going to have all your instruction you're doing, but also it's like, well, when do I stop instructing? Right. As you're working with your students, you're observing, you're watching them, you're seeing what they're doing independently. And then you may say, like, we've been counting by tens off decade for like, 5 or 6 days now. I believe my kids have it. And I feel like I'm ready to document and that they have this skill and we're ready to move on to the next skill of what they're working on. So there's a couple places where you can go for progress monitoring. The first one is in the assessment folder. This is in the free materials folder. There is a version 1 of the assessment. And what that is the one that's in the original webinar that you're trained on. There's also a version 2, and the version 2 is very similar. Some of the questions are just slightly different, so kids aren't seeing the same ones, particularly with the addition subtraction. So it's just different questions, but it's measuring the same thing. It has the same exact levels. So you can always use the version 1 or version 2 for progress monitoring. The problem is you don't want to only use version 1 because then your kids are seeing the exact same ones week after week, and then they're going to realize, oh, 8 plus 6, they're going to see 8 plus 6 every Friday or every time you're trying to test them on it. So the idea is you're giving them different versions of it. So you have version 1 you can use once or twice, then you have version 2. And then we'll talk about the third spot where you can go for progress monitoring. So this is probably the easiest and best way to progress monitor. You have your eLibrary 2.0, which we've talked about extensively, how it's of all the resources, the most in-depth and the best one that we have. Sorry. Okay. And so when we go through with this, again, when you go through and in that introduction page, or I guess you could say the menu where it has the mini lessons and the student practice, you're going to see a part that says progress monitoring. And this is formative assessments. So this is another place where you can go. So again, you're working on counting by tens level B, right? You did your mini lesson 2. You did some of the instant intervention. Maybe you even worked with some of the 1.0 and did the 1.0 additional lesson. And then you also did the workbook pages. You may say, all right, I'm ready to go ahead and progress monitor now and document that my students have this. So this is what it is. It says form assessment level B counting by tens. And so it just says mastery, yes or no. Count by 10 starting at 6, and I'll tell you when to stop. So you just read that to them. And they'll either go 6, 16, 26, 36, 46, or they won't. Now there's bonus tasks on this too that you can give to your student. And this one's saying count the 10 rod starting at 4. So there's 4. Will they go 4, 14, 24, 34, 44, or 7, 17, 27, 37, 47, 57, 67. So this is another place where you can go. And if your students are able to go through and they're able to do this, you've now documented they're successfully a level B, right? That's their mastery. And then you're ready to go on to level C for that. And then finally, the last place for progress monitoring is you can always just use observation, right? As you're working with your students, you can always just write notes down. If you ask a student, let's count by seven or let's count by 10 starting at seven, you can go ahead and you could actually write that down and track that too. Also, you have all these different formative assessments. And remember, if you give the students, one of the workbook pages, and you can always use those workbook pages as long as you're not assisting them or helping them, you're using it as an actual assessment. If you're not helping them, like I just want to see if they can do, you can always use, the workbook page in the 2.0 or the 1.0 as a formative assessment as well. So there's lots of places where you can get data where you'll be able to track their progress and document to move on. Okay. And that will be it for this particular part that was just focused really on the instructional materials. I know that your leader or your director was going to watch this, and then she was going to email any questions that you guys have. And if we need to set something up to go through something more thoroughly, we can do that. But that will be the end of this session.